All right, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the vBrownBag Theater. I'm Sean Massey, and I'm here today to talk about upgrading your VDI environments to Windows 10. So before we begin, a little bit about myself. I'm a VCDX in desktop and mobility. You can find my blog, Twitter, and LinkedIn here, and I'm also involved in some other things. All right, so before we talk about being successful with having your environment upgraded to Windows 10, let's talk a little bit about a brief history of Windows. So if we go all the way back to 2001, that's when Windows XP dropped. And it's been kind of a fixture in enterprises. It lasted 12 years. In fact, this year it turns 18. Next year it turns 18, which is kind of scary. Then afterwards we had Windows 7, and that also kind of stuck around for a while. And in 2 years, it's gonna hit end of support. And then Windows 8.1 kind of came along a little bit after that, and it also has a 10-year lifespan. But you notice something interesting here when we look at this, right? We didn't go right from XP to 7, or from 7 to 8.1. There were some things in the middle. So we end up with kind of this little Star Trek problem, this even odd. Some things are good, some things are bad. Right? We kind of skipped over Vista because, well, Vista's Star Trek 5. And we skipped over Windows 8 because Windows 8 changed a lot of things and we had to go back. Okay. And because we got really comfortable with these versions of Windows that stuck around, we got really good at supporting them, which oftentimes meant, hey, have you rebooted it, right? So what does all this have to do with Windows 10? Right. Everything that we know about Windows and how we've managed it, how we've deployed it, changes with Windows 10. The first thing is that we go to a new release model, right? Windows 10 changes from the big release, couple small service packs, big release, to an ongoing release model, where we have frequent feature releases, along with our monthly security updates. It also aligns with the Microsoft Office 365 release cadence. So when a new version of Office 365 drops, or a new major version, there's also going to be a new major version of Windows 10. There's also multiple servicing channels. So there's multiple release cycles for Windows depending on what our needs are. So we'll talk about a couple of those. We've heard about the long-term servicing channel and semi-annual channel. Those are two of the main channels that will impact enterprises. And finally, death by 1,000 patches is done, right? Every monthly update cycle now is a cumulative update cycle. Every patch that Microsoft has released is bundled together in one release. So we don't have to test and validate every single patch that comes out because we just get them in one big chunk. Now, unfortunately, for people who have to admin Windows Server update services, that means you probably need a little bit more space on your server. But it is nice for the people who have to test patches and test application compatibility. So in terms of servicing channels, there's three main channels that we deal with. Windows Insider, which is the ongoing beta channel. Every time Microsoft development gets a semi-stable release, they'll release it to the insiders to test and find additional bugs. That channel is really meant for developers and home power users. Developers so they can keep ahead of the curve and know what's coming and validate that their code will work, and home power users because, well, I think some of them are kind of crazy. Semi-annual channel is really what most people are going to be on, right? This is a channel that has 2 feature releases per year. So every March and every October, there's going to be a major release. This release is going to have new features that aren't going to be backported to earlier versions and will be available as an in-place upgrade to users with physical machines. These semi-annual channel releases also only have 18 months of support. So you have to continually refresh and update the operating systems on these machines to maintain support from Microsoft. And finally, there's the long-term servicing channel. This is the channel that has 10 years of support per release. Now, the drawback to that is there's only a release every couple of years. So when Microsoft makes that release, it's going to be at a fixed point in time on a fixed code base. When that release drops, it's not going to get any new features until the next long-term servicing branch build comes out. Now, because of that, this branch only gets security updates. Now, you may be thinking, hey, this is great, right? I don't want to have to deal with this 18-month support lifecycle. But the challenge with that is, I'm at a fixed point in time. So if Intel releases a new processor, Microsoft is not necessarily going to support that on the long-term servicing branch. You would have to wait for the next one to come out to get support for that chipset. Also, Microsoft is not necessarily supporting some of their key tools like Office and Visual Studio on long-term servicing branch. This next branch that's coming out, which is the 1809 release, will have a long-term servicing build, and it will support Office 2019. But if you're not on Office 2019, it won't support Office 2016. And if you're trying to run a future version of Office on it, it won't be supported as well. This branch is intended particularly for things that are fixtures, right? Factory control equipment, right? So if I'm putting in some specific machine tools that have software on it, long-term servicing branch is perfect for that because I don't want to be updating Windows on that machine because it could cause an outage for my facility. The same thing goes for medical equipment, right? ATMs, other types of fixtures that you don't want to be frequently making updates to. So this is kind of what the servicing channel looks like. We can see on the right-hand side, that's the old way of doing it. And those pillars align with the major Windows releases. Going forward, it's going to be the green. We're going to have more frequent releases. The benefit of this is that we don't have to do we don't have to do major testing. Once something is generally compatible with Windows 10, chances are it's not going to be broken by a future release. Although I can't guarantee that. Microsoft may make changes. There may be patches that break applications. That sort of stuff does happen. But in general, the level of the burden for getting to the next version of Windows 10 will not be as great as going from XP to 7 or 7 to 10. So what are some best practices for doing VDI in Windows 10? So the first thing is you're probably going to be doing semi-annual channel. And because semi-annual channel has that release every 6 months and such a short support window, you may be tempted to say, hey, I'm going to keep up with every release, and I'm going to update every 6 months. You don't want to do that, right? You may have small groups of test users who have an updated version of Windows, or every updated version of Windows 10 for app compatibility testing, but in general, for most of your users, you want to give them a longer life cycle. Users expect some stability, and if you make frequent changes to them in a business environment, it may cause other issues in terms of user experience and user comfort with the technology. The other thing you have to consider is how often do you want to actually be testing and implementing new versions of Windows 10 in VDI, right? If I'm doing this every 6 months and I'm doing this across a large user base, by the time I get done implementing all my Windows 10 desktops, I'm back to the beginning. And I'm going to be back to upgrading my images, back to testing, and back to redeploying. So there's a lot of churn and a lot of testing there. And finally, you actually have to determine a testing strategy to be able to do these upgrades, right? You're not just going to put an untested version of Windows, even if it is, a major Microsoft release, into production right away. So you have to know how you want to test and validate that all your applications work, right? That your core applications work, and that it doesn't break anything with your VDI environment. When it comes to building your Windows 10 images, you don't want to just update them and then move forward with them, right? Typically with Windows 7, you would patch it every month and then you would just redeploy it. With Windows 10, because we have these major feature updates every 6 to 12 or every 6 months, you don't want to do that in-place upgrade. First off, VMware does not support that. So if I'm doing if I have a VMware Horizon environment, and I want to go from 1709 to 1803, I can't do an in-place upgrade. I would actually have to go through, remove the Horizon agent, remove the app volumes agent, and then do the upgrade. So it's actually easier just to rebuild the image. It also means you don't have to do testing, right? When I do an in-place upgrade with Windows 10, and how many have done that with their physical machines? How many times is something broken? Yep, right? So if I'm upgrading my VDI image, which may be used by hundreds or thousands of users, I don't want to potentially roll it out after doing this upgrade without having validated that all my applications work as the users expect them to. So by doing a clean build every time, I get a fresh install of all my applications. So there's less concern about having the upgrade break something. And I know then if my application doesn't function as expected on a clean build, then it's likely an application compatibility issue and not something that broke. Also, if I have multiple images for my different use cases, I would have to do this testing on every single image because every single upgrade may break something different. And finally, this rebuild idea is mainly for non-persistent desktops, right? I can't rebuild the image that I use for my persistent desktops. All right, so we're going to skip the persistent desktop piece here. The last thing we want to think about is optimization. Windows 10 uses more resources than Windows 7. So when we deploy it, we need to make sure it's optimized to get the best user experience. We need to turn off unneeded services. We need to disable UI features, etc. There's optimization tools like the VMware OSAT Fling that will actually go through and do this for you. And it will remove anything that is unneeded in a virtual desktop that may be there. And finally, we want to get rid of the modern and UWP applications. These are the Windows Store applications that are installed on the machine. These are installed on a per machine basis. So if you're using non-persistent desktops where users go from machine to machine, those are tied to a particular machine. They're only updated through the Microsoft Store, and they break sysprep. So the more you can take out, the more stable your image is going to be. Now there's a couple things to do here. First is there's a couple PowerShell commands here that you can run. These will remove the ones that are already installed on the machine. And these completely remove them, right? So not only does it remove it on a per user basis, but it also completely uninstalls them from the system. The bottom option is to disable consumer experiences. This is a GPO setting that you can run. What it does is when you launch Windows 10 as a new user, you know how you have Candy Crush and Adobe, Photoshop, and all that stuff. When you enable this setting or disable cloud content, it prevents Windows from going out to the store and preceding those applications. So you get a cleaner start menu, and you don't have to worry about trying to remove them. So then users aren't tempted to also install them on the machine. All right, so Ariel is giving me the hook. So I want to thank you all for coming, and don't forget to fill out your surveys, and thank you.